chat about that. And then we'll do a little bit more APA, so I'm going to add some new APA formatting things onto the pile. And then I'll talk a little bit about the article summary, feedback from last week, and the new article is up. So don't forget, that's due at 11 o'clock on Thursday. So if anyone needs an extension, please let me know tomorrow so that I can do that fairly. Okay, so we want to look at the reading. Oh, and hopefully you read this little short article by Duncan Blanchard, References and Unreferences. I just stick that in because it gives me a giggle every time I look at this article. And in relation to last week's class, just to show you how important that APA, the referencing is, and trying to get the referencing right, because this is just the silliest example of the referencing being wrong. And the biggest thing is, even if you've seen the original paper, don't copy someone else's reference to the paper, because everything that's published goes through an editor. And an editor is only human, and they make mistakes. So just because you see the reference in another article, or you find it online somewhere, doesn't mean it's done correctly. All right, so please just get into the habit of checking your APA and trying to be familiar with the kinds of things you're expected to be able to format. As I said last week, no one's asking that you know APA. We hope, and as your time in the program goes on, we start to expect that you at least have some understanding of the kinds of things you're supposed to be formatting, right? So try to start paying attention to that idea. So what constitutes good research then? Right? The reading. Hi, Melissa. Good. So the reading talks quite a lot about some points that you want to start trying to pay attention to. As much as possible, we want to use what we call peer-reviewed research. Okay? So peer-reviewed research means it went through a process before it was published, whereby people who are experts in that field of research looked at it and edited it and gave it some criticism before it was published. So in theory, that means it should be relatively accurate and quite a strong piece of research. Doesn't always work, but most of the time this process works very well. All right? Next week, we're going to meet in the library, and Michelle Wood will give you a lecture discussion on how to find good peer-reviewed research. Right? What do you have to put into the database? Where do you go? What do you not want to look at? All right? So she's updated her notes, and I've loaded those. So there's a little package of notes that she'll go through, and she gives a very good discussion on how to use the library resources. And we'll take the camera, we'll film it, and load it as normal so the distance students can follow that lecture as well. Right? So when we're reading, even if it's published and it's been peer-reviewed, doesn't mean it's perfect. Everybody's human, we will miss things, and it's okay when you're reading to be a little bit critical and say, well, you know, I'm not so sure that that's right. If we were good enough at statistics, right? We could look at a research paper and say, well, given the question and given the data they collected, that really wasn't the best statistical analysis to use. I'm not that good at stats, so I don't do that, but some people do, right? Or we might say, well, you know, it would have been better if they had added in this piece of data as well. It would have been a stronger paper if they'd given me A, B, and C instead of just A and B, all right? So when you're reading, don't just say, well, it's published, ergo, it's perfect. Because that isn't the way to approach it, all right? I'm going to tell you now, Michelle will reinforce this next week, be very, very wary of just plain internet material if it isn't an accessed article. Right? Because there's a lot of people with opinions that they're entitled to have, but aren't scientifically accurate. Yes.
So is that what access? You said access website. You said that means it's credible, is what you're saying?
If you're accessing a peer-reviewed journal through the internet, that's fine. But if you're accessing Joe Schmo's coaching tip of the week, I would be very, very careful unless you can confirm his tip of the week by going and checking actual literature, you know, a textbook or something like that, okay? On the other hand, you have very nice access to things like the Wall Street Journal or Time magazine, okay? Now, we would not recommend that you use all newspaper articles, right? But some newspaper articles are okay. So later in the semester, as we're building your annotated bibliography, it's okay for out of your 10 articles, for 1 or 2 of them to be a newspaper article or a magazine article. If all 10 of them are newspaper articles, I'm not going to be too happy with that submission, right? Because what we want to see, what we want to get you used to, is finding real research, real good, strong, scientific, peer-reviewed research. Okay, so that should be the bulk of what you're looking for. And I like very much that they support my ideas of you've got to pick something for your question that interests you. Remember, you're going to be looking at this for a minimum of 2 semesters. So you don't want to get stuck with a question or a set of material that in 3 or 4 weeks' time you go, oh God, I wish I hadn't picked this. This is so dull, right? Because that's no fun then. Either you have to start again, which is a whole heap of work in a very short amount of time, or you have to spend the next semester and a half doing something you're not very interested in. So really take the time now. You've got a couple of weeks. Take the time now to really find an idea and a question that is fun for you, that's interesting for you. Right? There's got to be a better way than clicking on this thing, but I can't find it. All right, so both our textbook and the APA manual spend quite a lot of time explaining what peer-reviewed literature is and how you decide on journal quality. Not all journals are equivalent. I know in my field that if I'm reading a paper that comes from, let's see, JOPED, right? Journal of Physical Education, Recreation and Dance. That is generally a good journal for teaching articles but they don't always report the most current research. So if I find an article in JOPERD at this level of writing, I would go and back it up with something that was up-to-date research on that issue. Does that make sense? Right? And then this bit is a little bit confusing. I should have switched this out because it depends, it was on another article. But it's still a good example, even though you haven't read this particular article yet. The procedures section doesn't specify that there was post-match testing. So this article is a repeated measures type article. They collect the pre-data, they do something, and then they collect the post-data. Well, we mentioned last week that the procedures section should be a recipe, right? This is what I did, step by step. So if they collected data twice, they should tell me they collected data twice. And they don't. But when you look at the results, and you read the results, they clearly did collect data twice. Well, that's a pretty big error on behalf of the editor, right? So several things could have happened there. One, it wasn't there and the editors and the reviewers missed it. Two, it was there and somewhere between editing and printing, it disappeared into the ether, which happens, right? So it's a little bit odd that occurred because it's a good journal. So you wouldn't expect that kind of error. The other one was that, in my view, and this is my personal view, and maybe other people will disagree with me, but in my view, in the conclusion of this article, they start talking about individuals with epilepsy, but nowhere in the article had they mentioned anyone with epilepsy. What I suspect happened was that originally this was one bigger article that also included population of people with epilepsy, and they decided to cut it into two and get two publications out of one data collection, and when they cut it in two, they didn't edit it very carefully. That's what I suspect happened there, because you don't just suddenly introduce a new population in the discussion of your paper that you never talked about. Right? All right, so next week we'll go over this again in lots of detail, all right? But library databases and interlibrary loan are two things you want to start to get very, very familiar with. Okay? If you go to the library webpage, then you can click on periodic electronic databases and you can access lots and lots of articles for free. Okay? You can search by a subject that you're looking for, so you could just type in soccer, or you could type in female athletes, or you could type in strength training and football, but I mean, anything you like, and see what comes up. Obviously, the better you are at the terms you put in, the better the results you get on the papers that are relevant for you. And that can sometimes be quite tricky, just finding the right term to type in. It's like, there's got to be research on this thing, right? But you keep coming up with nothing. You're like, there can't be nothing. I'm just not typing in the right question, the right term. At no point when you're in this program do you have to pay for any articles. okay? So don't click on anything that says you've got to pay for it, because I don't know how they pull it off given our budget situation, but students on this campus are really, really lucky that you get complete free access to interlibrary learning, right? So what that means is that anytime you see an article you'd like to read, but we don't have direct access to it through our database, you can request the library to get you a copy of it, and they'll get it for you. That is a massive perk, right? I went to Auburn, it's a Research One institute, it has millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we had a budget. I could get 4 papers a month, right? Or whatever, I can't even remember. But I had a limit on how many papers I could get from our interlibrary loan at Auburn. You guys have no limit. They give you complete open shop. Please, 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 though, don't use that, right? Because if people start abusing it, they'll have to take it away. So don't ask them to get you books or articles if you're not going to use them for your research, right? Be certain that it's something you're going to read and it's something you really want to get the opportunity to look at. Doesn't mean you have to use it, right? You might read it and go, oh, well, okay, this was actually not very good, or, oh, I thought this was going to give me something else and I can't. That's okay, but don't order it just because it looks like fun, or, oh, that would be a great coaching article for my CSCS exam. We're not paying for the CSCS exam, right? So just be a little bit careful how you use it. Do plan ahead. Michelle will talk to you about this. She'll be more up to date on where they are. It can take a week or so for a paper to come through. Usually they're very, very quick. If you want a book, it takes longer, right? But usually articles are very fast. You need to be careful though, because you can't have a deadline on Saturday for a paper in one of your classes and order the article on Tuesday and then tell your instructor, well, I can't make my Saturday deadline because my paper didn't come in. Because they're not going to care. Write your assignment without that paper, or you should have planned ahead and got the paper sooner. Right? So just be aware that you need to be a little bit organized with that. All right, so last week we looked at references. So when you look at a research article, at the back of the research article is a list of all the papers that they sourced and included in their article. If it says it's a reference list, everything that is on the reference list has to be in the article and vice versa. If they call it a bibliography, that means there might be things in that list that they didn't use. That's the technical difference between a bibliography and a reference list. A lot of people interchange those two, but really they're not quite the same thing. Okay?
Dr. Wall, why would you have to put a reference if you never used it in a paper? Why would they put it in a bibliography?
Yeah, because maybe it's something of interest, but they didn't end up using anything in there, but they think that someone else would like it. You don't very often see bibliographies in articles, they're usually in textbooks. I've only seen a couple in an article. So at the end we have this reference list, right? And the point of the reference list is that your reader can go and find something for themselves and read the entire thing, because you only summarized it, right? That means that in the writing, within the body of the text, whether it's an article or an essay or a book, you have to let the reader know when you're using a piece of information from that particular paper, right? So within the text, it's called a citation. And citations as references have lots of different forms depending on what it is that you're citing. Is it a newspaper article? Is it a radio program? Is it a journal article? Right? How do I let the reader know where to go in the reference list? So the citation is the signpost to the reference list. Okay? So if you look on page 169 and 170, APA tell you when you have to cite, ties back very, very closely to the idea of plagiarism that we started talking about last week. All right? So if you use someone else's information and you do not tell your reader that that information came from somewhere else, you are plagiarizing. Right? So citations become very important because they're the thing that get you out of trouble. You can't be accused of plagiarizing if you cite correctly and appropriately. Right? You might be copying, but it's not quite the same. Plagiarism means you deliberately took this stuff and you deliberately did not tell the reader where it came from. And as I said last week, we say deliberately, but deliberately can mean I didn't even know I did it. But that doesn't get you off the hook. Okay? So, when and why, APA explains very well. 174 to 179 for the rules. And there's lots of them. Yes, ma'am.
I got a question about when you paraphrasing, like you're just like say the author or whatever said something, and then you say something like such and such suggested or something like that. Like what if you don't use because in the book they give you that as like an option, like you can say Jones or whatever suggested that. But let's say you just paraphrase it, how would you cite that? Like say if you don't put they suggested it, but you just want to cite that they did.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But you can
Yes.
put that in your paraphrase.
So you don't even have to paraphrase it, to be honest, to have to cite it.
Okay.
If I say, Culpeper investigated, hold on, then that's already wrong, because after Culpeper I would have to put the year. So let's say Culpeper 2010 investigated blah, 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 right? And suggests previous research missed this idea. I don't have to tell anybody about the previous research. All I would have to do is open the bracket and put the previous research in the bracket. Right? So I can say the sky is blue, blah, 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 blah. I don't have to say what they said about the sky being blue. As long as they mention that the sky is blue, if I put them in brackets, I'm okay. I'll explain it again in a little while. All right, I'll come back to it.
Confused too.
Because everyone's looking confused, so I didn't do a very good job then. All right, so number of authors changes the format of the citation. So again, the rules are very finicky, they're very precise. You need to start trying again. Don't learn them, just look at it every time. Go, okay, citation, it's a journal. I have 5 authors. Do I write out 5 authors in the year, or do I only have to put 1 author? Don't try and remember, use the book. Honestly. as I said, it's not, I don't particularly like this format, this edition of the book. These squiggles on the edge of the page are a complete waste of time. I mean, why don't they tell me what the chapter is about instead of giving me a pretty little leaf? It's useless, right? I'm sorry, I'm not in control of APA publications. But use the book. Don't try to learn it because you'll get it wrong and then you'll lose marks. Right? Oh, okay, let's go back and do a better example. Okay. All right, so from your practice article last week, and the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research is not an APA journal, which is why they've got numbers where you will cite, right? Because it's a biology type journal and they use a different manual, okay? But in the article, at some places they talk about, for example, Worrell et al., and you would have the day, and Handel et al., and you would put the day, found increases in hamstring isokinetic torque. Right? So in that particular instance, you're specifically saying these authors tell me they found this, right? But if you go through, at one point further down, it says, as mentioned above, flexibility training can increase strength. Open parentheses, reference, 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 close parentheses. So in that instance, I didn't explain what every one of those references said about flexibility training, but they all mention the fact that flexibility training can improve strength. So, I don't necessarily have to use a citation as a summary. I can use a citation as backup, as proof for a statement I want to say. Right? So if I want to say preschool children improve motor skills when we run a mastery climate, I don't then have to go on and say Valentini and Rudisill, Goodway and Branter, blah 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 blah, and explain every single study out there. I can make that one statement, and as long as I cite those studies, I'm not saying, I say because I'm the only person, I'm making this up and I decided this piece of information, that I have proof that what I'm saying is true. Does that?
Yeah.
I did a very bad job over here, sorry.
So you would like put the name and then a semicolon, the name, and then after the last name, would you put the year? Or
It depends. So if you've got only one study that you're using in that instance, you would just put, and it depends how many authors there are, right? You would put authors and year. If you've got 3 studies that all support that point, you can put all 3 of them. So you would put the first set of authors plus the year, semicolon. Next set of authors plus the year, semicolon. Next set of authors plus the year, close parentheses. Right? So it depends why and how you're using the citation. Are you using it as support? Are you using it for support for a statement you're making? Or is this a key study you actually want to tell your reader about? Right? Our article summaries that we're practicing right now are, this is a key study that I need my reader to know about. I have to know how to summarize, how to find the really crucial things in the article to tell my reader because this article is important. Versus, I want to say this point, but I can't say it unless I can support it. because ultimately, and it applies to me as well as to you, no one cares what I think. No one cares what I think. No one cares what you think. You cannot think. You can only say this and here's the proof, right? And that's just how it works. I can't do it either. I have to have proof. If I want to say the sky is blue, I have to find proof to back up that the sky is blue. That's just the way the world works, okay? So, does that make that a little bit clearer for everybody? How are we doing? Do we have any questions on here? Oh, Carl joined us. Well done, Carl. Nice to see you.
Do you have
Okay.
a camera on?
We can't see any of you in a camera, guys, so I'm not sure if you don't have your cameras on, but if you're not hearing me or you've got any questions and we're not hearing what you're asking, please type them in.
He said he can't see you.
I did that
Oh.
earlier because Tori and Brian were in and I couldn't see them up here, so that was my question. Okay. All right. Onward. Punctuation. I told you there was stuff in APA you weren't going to expect to be there. So, how do we punctuate? We put a period at the end of a sentence. You would think it was that simple, but no. So, pages 87 to 96 give you punctuation rules. Again, don't try to learn them, just use the manual, all right? Space twice. I think this one is still up to date. Space twice after a period at the end of a sentence. If you find I'm out of date on that, let me know, but I think that's still up to date. That's quite frustrating for people of my generation because when in school we were learning to type, you have to press the space bar twice, and so that's the motor pattern that you learn, press the space bar twice. And then in the 5th edition of the APA, they decided you could only have one space after the period. So you had to relearn not to type the space bar twice. And then we get to the 6th edition and it goes back to 2 space. So I spent 5 years in grad school learning to only space once, and now I have to space twice again, right? So, it's ridiculous. Who cares whether you space once or twice, right? APA cares. Don't ask me why. I cannot answer that question. All I can tell you is that's the rule, right? I don't know. The comma one will depend on probably who your English teacher was. So, if I'm saying the dog is brown, black, and white, you have to have a comma here. All right? Again, that's one of those English rules that changes. When I was young, it was there, then it wasn't there, it's back again. So if you're listing anything, you need a comma before the last thing in the list. All right? And there's lots of other fun rules. I'm just pointing out kind of the immediate ones that you're likely to use when you're writing, but there's lots of them. Okay, when do you use brackets? When do you use a slash? When can you put a dash? If you put a dash, if you say semi-retired, semi-dash retired, is there a space on either side of the dash or no space on either side of the dash? Right?
Is there?
I don't know. I have to look it up. with no dash. Who the heck? You know, it really, and as I say, I can't, there's nothing I can do to make this less painful. There isn't, all right? And I can't tell you not to worry about it and ignore it, because you'll fail on papers, right? So all I can do is say, I feel your pain, hold your APA manual very dear, right? Don't ever go away. If you've got homework to do over the next 2 years and you're going away for the weekend, don't ever go away and not take your APA manual. Stick it in your suitcase. Or make sure that you've got online access to the APA site so that you can check yourself before you send your homework in. Right? Spelling and hyphenation rules. So preferred spellings. When you should and should not hyphenate. They give you general rules. If you can't find the exact thing you're looking for, use a general rule. And then abbreviations. The abbreviations actually is one I use a lot because I never can remember, I can't remember, I have to look it up because it just will not stick in my brain. You can abbreviate hour to HR. You can abbreviate minute to min. Second is only S, not sec or sex. It's only S. But you're not supposed to abbreviate year or month or day or week. Right? So I have to say that the abbreviation pages I use a lot because I just can never remember. I always want to put, when I'm doing ages, when I'm talking about my participants, I always want to put 18 to 23 years. I do that all the time. And then I get a great big circle around and I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to write out years and I forgot again. Right? So, that one never makes any sense to me. Why can I put S for second, but I can't put years? I can put HR for hour, but I can't put YR for year. I don't understand.
And you don't have to abbreviate if you don't want to, right? Do they ask you?
No, you should abbreviate.
Okay.
If you can, you should.
Okay.
And in the journal's defense, space is money. So, they don't want you to take up letters and space if you don't have to. But yeah, it's quite a work of nonsense, the APA manual. All right, so I'm trying to spread the APA information out over a few weeks because it gets a little overwhelming at times. All right, so this week we looked at citations, punctuation, abbreviations. All right, and as I said, it's really about having an idea. What am I supposed to look up in the manual? Not, although I have to know where I'm supposed to put a comma. Okay. But if you don't know that you're supposed to be watching out for commas, then that's the problem, right? So, questions on peer-reviewed research or APA? Okay, all right. So, what I wanted to do was quickly run through the idea of the template again. I know I did that in quite a lot of detail last week, but just to reinforce that and have a quick chat about these article summaries. I have to say, guys, you all earn major brownie points, the people that did it, because I've never had such a good set of practice articles in the time that I've been doing this assignment. So thank you, that was very nice. I appreciated that. It made my job much easier. Okay, so everybody used the template, we're fine there. Some people forgot about the 2 lines per row. Yes, ma'am?
That's what I got a question about. I don't get the 2 lines.
The
Like-
2 lines
like,
per
what am I
row?
saying? Like, what are you saying when I do this? I got my paper right
You
here.
got your paper?
Mhm.
So I'm calling a row, so I have 19 rows
Okay,
in
these,
this
okay.
table.
Okay.
You're allowed 2 lines of writing per row, so you're allowed a total of 38 lines
Okay.
in your summary.
Okay.
But that 38 lines can't contain more than 300 words, ignoring the reference. The reference doesn't count.
So when you say 2 lines, you're saying,
In each box, you
In
have 2 lines, and then you go on.
Go on to the next box.
oh, so I need to,
Oh,
like, if I,
I
like,
did
here,
one.
here,
I did
and I
Yes.
can stop
for
and then go
each.
to the next box.
Yes.
Oh, you
And-
did one box for each?
Well, like, I
So
took-
2 lines, so basically like
So it should be
one
this
line
big.
and another
It would
line,
take
then goes to
6
the next
lines.
box.
Yeah. And let me explain my reason for that, because you're never going to have, I suspect that you won't be asked for that in any of your other classes, but I have a reason for making you do it that way, and that is that my goal is that you learn to write succinctly.
Yeah.
Right? And so the problem with these tables is if I say, all right, you just can write, you've got 1 row. Well, you can write 15 lines in that row, because the table will just let you keep writing and just keep expanding the row, right? And then we've defeated the point. So I put the boundary that you can only put 2 lines in a row, because that way you can't write too much stuff, hopefully. And if you go over the 300 word limit, you probably are not going to go more than 50 or 60 words over, which is a lot over, right? That's a lot over, but you're not going to be at 500 if you stick to the 2 lines per row.
Maybe it's the
Okay.
same for the citations too, like 2, okay, so those 3 boxes you
Yes.
have are used to assign the whole order.
Yeah, and that one's less important.
Okay.
But what you want to be careful of then is when you change row in the table, Microsoft decide that that means you have to have a capital letter at the beginning. Except you might not need a capital letter at the beginning. So that means you have to edit your papers, right? You've got to read your paper before you give it in, because if there's a capital letter where there shouldn't be a capital letter, particularly if it's in the reference, you're going to lose a point, right? So it does lots of things for me as the instructor, because it makes you pay attention to what you're writing. It makes you have to edit your work, because otherwise Microsoft will create errors for you that you didn't put there. Okay? So it does a lot of things for me to make you better students. All right? So that's my reason. Does that make sense now, how that looks? And I put a model up in Blackboard, so my version of this summary is available for you in the Blackboard site. Right? So you can compare where I've written something You can have a look at the model. If you still don't really understand what I'm getting at, come and ask me. Okay? Let me see. Oh, remember in the participant section that, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Here we go. All right. Oh, don't take information from the abstract. So don't take the purpose or the conclusion out of the abstract. The abstract is already a summary, so it might not be the full purpose or conclusion statement. Find them for yourself in the article. Okay? Remember that we do not alphabetize authors in our discipline, so when you're writing the reference, keep the authors in the order they are on the paper. Don't forget that you're supposed to put their initials the way they are in the paper. A lot of people put their first initial and didn't include the second initial for the people that had it. All right? People's initials are, I get very perturbed when the university calls me Sarah Wall, because I'm Sarah J. Wall, and I don't know why that bothers me. It really bothers me. So, you know, that people's initials are important to them. Again, this is from last year, but I think I was clear. If not, let me repeat it. The purpose statement, you are allowed to copy directly from the paper. When you find the sentence that you think is the purpose of the paper, you're allowed to use that word for word directly from the paper. Because if you try to write that for yourself in your own words, you might change the meaning of it. And right now, the skill is finding the purpose, because it isn't always going to say the purpose of this paper is. Sometimes it will be phrased differently. So this semester, what I'm concentrating on is you finding that purpose statement. You don't have to reword that. All right?
Same with the conclusion, right?
Same with the conclusion. Find the one sentence that counts as the conclusion, use it directly into your summary. Type of article. So go back to page 9 in your APA manual, have a look at types of article. If you're looking at other research textbooks, they have some different concepts there. The book that you'll use for 505 has another set of options that you could use for type of article. All right, so just be thinking the type of article, and again, this is a skill set, not something you'll use when you're writing. Right? When you're writing, you don't say Culpeper 2010 in his empirical applied paper. You would never say that, right? But you should know what kind of research you're reading. You should be able to identify whether it's a literature review or it's an empirical paper. You'll be able to tell whether it's qualitative or quantitative once we've done a bit more work on that, right? So this is another skill set box, because even if you're not going to say it, you really should be able to identify what you're reading as grad students, right? Design method is important. You have to know, what was the plan? When I read the article, what was the layout of the data collection, right? Was it observational? Was it a survey? Was it a pre-post? There were repeated measures, right? What did they do to collect this data? What was the plan for the collection? Participants, enough to ID them with the problem. right? So you don't need to split up males and females unless the problem is comparing males and females. Or one age group to another age group. Okay.
So for the group that we just did for the participants, would we need to say male and female, even though they weren't comparing male, female,
On the one we just did, I would not put in male and female,
just
no.
the 32
Yeah,
column?
yeah.
Okay, so, okay, when it, like in the last article, like for the procedures, you know, they paired the students according to their sex and I guess their repetition maximum for each exercise. So in the procedures, would you put they paired them according to sex?
I got around that by saying they were matched pairs. That's a little technical. So, you could say that they were paired according to their 1RM and their sex.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I would bother putting that into a summary, but I think it would depend on if I was trying to find words. Like when you're at 301 words and your word limit is 300 and you have to find that one word because otherwise you get a 0 on the paper. I had an instructor like that, right? Then Brian's internet keeps dropping his connection. You know, things like that start to count because you would save some words by not saying that, and is it really crucial at that point? If you just say they were matched and split into two groups, you've given the reader the idea. If they want to know how they were matched, they can go and look at the paper, right? So that decision to me would depend on how much flexibility I have with the word limit. When you're looking at the procedures, go back to the purpose statement. Right now, you're looking for the key things they did that relate to that purpose statement. Right? In 505, you're going to have to add a couple of points because you will have to say human subjects approval was submitted and approved. Right? Well, you don't have to pull that out because if it was published in a peer-reviewed paper, obviously they had human subjects approval, right? So that's not a crucial point that you have to highlight when you're summarizing the paper because everything's going to have that. Okay? Remember, data analysis is not the software package, it's the statistical analysis they used to look at the data if they did an analysis. Depends what kind of paper it is. And find the key results that feed back to the purpose statement. So oftentimes there's a lot more results reported than the immediate primary question, right? They went into it with a primary question, but then they had all these other questions as well that they collected data on. They chuck all of it into the results section. Well, that's great, but you only have a few lines to report the results. So make sure that you find the results that are immediately relevant to the variables that are in the purpose question. Okay. Went around that, you can use the conclusion. I really did think, on the whole, I was a little bit generous on some of the points that I gave because I was trying to give you an idea of what you would have scored on that paper if you had handed it in. I was a little bit nice on a couple, but I was not really, really, really nice. So those grades that you got were pretty close to what you would have got on a graded paper, all right? On the whole, you did a very nice job. In places, I would say in the procedures, some people got a little bit sidetracked, didn't stick to the really key things. Don't put your procedures up in your design methods. Make sure the design is the plan for the data collection, not the recipe, not the what they did step by step, right? So make sure you keep those separated out. There was a little bit of confusion in the results section, but my view, certainly for the first few weeks, is can you even get close to finding results that relate to the purpose, right? By the third or fourth article summary, I'll be expecting to see you picking out pretty good choices, all right? But there's a learning curve, okay? So, some people put no significant difference. There was no significant difference between the groups. Well, here's the thing. When you read the paper, they make that statement, but they make that statement in relation to the pre-test. Okay? Because they were looking for a difference between the groups in the post-test. That was the goal. Right? That one group would do something different because they had this different training. So if I'm looking for a difference between groups at the post-test, I would have to tell the reader that everybody was in the same place at the beginning. Otherwise, the difference at the end might not be because of what I did with the participants. Does that make sense? So the no significant difference was with regards to the pre-test 1RM. Everybody in the pool, when they were matched, both groups were equivalent. Now I do the training, now what happens? All right? So for you to write there was no significant difference between the groups was a little bit inaccurate. Plus, probably not necessary. It was probably a use of words that you didn't need, given the way you explain the procedures. Right? So it was a bit of a redundant sentence. Some people picked out that there was a difference in only one of the 3 exercises. My reading of the article says there were differences for both groups in all 3 lifts. There were only differences between the groups on 2 lifts, right? So that's quite detailed. Right now, if you said there were some differences pre-depart, I was pretty much giving you the point because the results sections can be very tricky to read when you don't have a lot of practice at them and you don't have a lot of statistical background. Right? So I have to give you credit for the attempt at summarizing a results section. So that's my plan. The attempt is supposed to get better as the semester goes on, otherwise the points will go down as the semester goes on. All right? So how I judge the points is dependent upon the amount of experience you've got at doing this now. Because you should be getting better. If on summary 6 what I get is there was no significant difference, you're going to get a big fat 0 because that's clearly wrong. Does that make sense? All right? So keep that in mind. I don't expect everything to be perfect. That's not fair. You haven't done this. You have to learn how to do it. That's the whole point. All right? A few people sent me drafts. By all means, send drafts. If I have the time, I will review them and get them back to you. I'll do the best I can. The only one, well, actually, there's a couple of you in the room who see me day to day. They'll tell the others what our days are like in HPE. But I will do my best if you get me a draft. Please remember to highlight in the title of your email that it's a draft, because what I get in Blackboard is a paper clip to say there's a paper there, and you saying, here's my submission. I'm going to think that's your final submission, and I'm not going to open it. So make sure that you tell me in the title of the email that it's a draft, so that I know you would like feedback if I've got time. All right? I think that's all I had. Unless people have other questions. Any of our, Melissa, Brian, Tori? Who else have we still got? Oh, why am I walking over here when I have the mouse right there? Good Lord. Okay, we're down to Tori and Brian and Melissa. Any questions, guys? We're not seeing you at all this week, and I can't hear. Oh! Is that Brian?
Yes.
Hey! When you talk, I can see you. That's weird. What was your question?
My audio and video feeds been bad, so I cut it down and try to listen to it so I could.
Okay. Did you have a question?
I did not today.
Okay. And Brian is actually coming into town in a few weeks' time, and he's hoping to join us in class if his timetable allows. So you will get to meet Brian, those of you that don't know him. You know Brian? You might know. He was in our undergrad program. So, okay. All right. If no one has other questions right now, we're done. We'll load the YouTube video. Most of the feedback I'm getting is that the YouTube video is way better than the archive in Collaborate. I don't know why, because this contraption is supposed to be a whammy jammy microphone that makes the audio in Collaborate okay, but I don't believe it is. So, okay, make sure you get